Morning news, Congressman Thaddeus McCotter, a Republican from Michigan. He was born in Detroit. He went to the University of Detroit. He serves today on the Financial Services Committee on Capitol Hill. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Oh, thanks for having me back.
Well, we appreciate you being here, sir. And let's start off in Detroit, Michigan. How is the economy there? I know the auto industry here in this country is faring better than it has in the past, the recent past. How about the real estate market in Detroit? How's everything looking there for you?
Well, our unemployment rate here in Michigan is some of the highest in the country. We're a manufacturing-based state. We're trying to diversify, but the reality remains that like the rest of the country, the jobs aren't coming back as we believe they should. People need them to. The real estate is dependent upon the jobs and what we're seeing, the free flow of capital, and that's not happening. So we remain a state that is resilient in the face of a recession.
Well, let me ask you this. On Friday, we got a disappointing jobs number. Non-farm payroll rates only rose by 39,000 jobs. The unemployment nationally ticked up by 9.8 or up to 9.8%. And we know that Michigan has been especially devastated. Do you think this administration is taking job creation seriously?
I think they are, but I think that the premises on which they try to base their policies are wrong, and we have a classic example of that, staring us in the face and with the deadline for the tax relief of the Bush years to be continued across the board. The people, quote-unquote, who are rich are being engaged in a class warfare argument by the Democrats in the House, some of them, and some of them in the Senate. And what we're seeing now is an unwillingness of people to invest that have the greatest capacity to in job creation.
But, Congressman, this sort of, to me, raises the question again, which is, the administration has known about the Bush-era tax rates going up as of January 1, 2011 for 2 years. Why are we still debating this in a lame duck session down to the 11th hour?
Well, I think we see that the strongest opposition comes from the Democratic leadership in the House. What we saw prior to the election was about 40-some Democrats, my colleagues across the aisle, signing a letter saying they understood that the relief had to continue across the board for the sake of the economy. Now, that vote did not occur. You would think that if you have a majority of House members willing to do something that important for the economy, that it would happen. But the Speaker, and she's still the Speaker until the end of the year, is against this and did not allow it to come to a vote. We now see brinksmanship occurring, and it's doing great damage to real working people and people who are unemployed who want to get back to work. Because, again, what this is causing is a people willing to hunker down, wait and see what happens. And if the tax rate goes back up, because we're not talking about tax cuts now, we're talking, as Mitch McConnell said, we're talking about a tax increase. We're talking about a change from the status quo for government to get more of people's money. That's going to have a detrimental effect on the economy because the worst thing you can do in a recession is raise taxes.
All right. Well, we ought to have some sort of a deal on these tax cuts, if we can call them that, before the lame duck ends. You talk about Nancy Pelosi. She's not for long. You're going to have your own speaker on the House side. The Republicans will be in majority. What beyond extending these tax cuts do the Republicans do in Congress for the next 2 years to bring us out of this malaise, sir?
I think you've already seen the leader soon to be Speaker designate Boehner talk about how we're going to continue the earmark moratorium, which is in many ways is going to be symbolic, but it's going to be necessarily symbolic. It's going to help start the process of reining in the spending and start to prove the process that the Republicans have learned their lesson. You've also seen the Republican leader's office talk about across-the-board freezes and non-defense discretionary spending. I think these are the types of steps that have to happen. You have to be fiscally responsible. You have to try to rein in many of the egregious provisions of, many of the egregious laws that were passed under the past Congresses. And you're going to have to look at the repeal of health care. You're going to have to look at trying to find ways to both allow the American people to grow the economy. You're going to have to find ways to rein in the spending that is out of control in Washington.
Well, Congressman, looking at the lame duck session, between now and New Year's, do you think that Nancy Pelosi is going to be responsible and extend those Bush-era tax cuts, or do you think she's going to continue down this class warfare path?
Well, I don't want to prognosticate. Clearly, I think that it would have been far more responsible to do them as quickly as possible, but we are where we are. And I would hope that my Democratic colleagues across the aisle would see that the that the attempt to raise taxes is not going to work. It was repudiated by the electorate at the polls, and prior to January 1st would come around and try to do something that's going to help create the conditions for job growth in the United States.
And what do you think accounts for the fact that they are still so intransigent, even though the midterms, gave them a shellacking?
Well, you have to ask them. I mean, I'm a representative, not a psychoanalyst, so I think they've been less than chary about expressing their views in the past. They continue to express their views now. Speak for themselves.
All right. Republican Congressman Thaddeus McCotter of the 11th District of Michigan. As always, sir, we appreciate your insight and analysis and a peek into the upcoming Congress. Thank you for being with us on America's Morning News, sir.